ever feel like you're physically there, with someone, but like your mind's just somewhere else?
Yeah.
Totally. We're all guilty of it. But today, we're diving deep into how that lack of presence, like really being there, how that affects our relationships, partners, friends, family, anyone we care about.
Right. And it's really interesting. The source material really emphasizes that just being present is, uh, it's about so much more than just like physically showing up.
Oh, for sure.
It's about this deeper mental and emotional engagement.
Definitely. And the source brings up this great example. Like, imagine you're talking to someone and they're nodding along, but you can just like tell they're not actually listening to a word you're saying.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever been on either side of that? I know I have.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all have at some point. And the interesting thing is, the source points out that those moments, those instances, can
Mhm.
actually leave us feeling unseen and unimportant, even if the other person like didn't mean it that way.
Right.
It's like this hidden cost of not being fully present.
Yeah, totally, totally. So, okay, so if presence is about more than just physically being there, how does the source actually define it?
Well, it breaks down into a few key elements. It's like active listening, maintaining eye contact, and really focusing on the now,
Okay.
like really being in the moment. It's about resisting the urge to let our minds, get pulled away by worries about the past or anxieties about the future.
That makes sense. So what happens when this lack of presence, when this becomes a pattern in our relationships? Like, what are the long-term consequences?
Yeah. So the source actually outlines four major impacts. And some of them I think might be a little bit more subtle than you'd think. So first, there's this emotional disconnection.
Hmm.
And that's when someone consistently feels ignored or just like their words don't matter.
Yeah.
And you can imagine over time that creates a lot of distance in the relationship.
Yeah, it makes sense. If you're constantly feeling like you're, talking to a brick wall, you're probably going to stop trying eventually, right?
Exactly.
Mm.
And that can actually lead to the second impact, which is increased conflict.
Oh, interesting.
Because when we're not truly present, we miss crucial details.
Hmm.
And then that leads to misunderstandings and arguments that maybe could have been avoided altogether.
Right,
In
right.
fact, there's a study that the source cites where it found that couples who actually practice active listening during disagreements are 40% more likely to find a resolution.
Wow, that's huge. That's a big difference. It really highlights the link between presence and healthy communication.
Yeah.
But this lack of presence, it doesn't just affect how we communicate, does it? What about like the overall strength of our relationships?
Yeah, you're right. It goes even deeper than that.
Yeah.
The source argues that without presence, you just end up with these superficial connections, relationships that lack real depth.
Okay.
And he uses this analogy of like a friend who's always on their phone when you're hanging out with them.
Right.
Like you might physically be together, but are you really connecting? Are you truly present with each other?
I see what you mean. Yeah, that's a great point. It's like the difference between like a quick text and a handwritten letter. One is functional, but the other is really an investment in that relationship.
Exactly. And that actually brings us to the final impact, which is maybe the most damaging.
Okay.
And that is an erosion of trust. When someone feels like they're constantly being unheard, they start to doubt if they can really rely on you. It's like confiding in someone who you know is really paying attention.
Right.
Would you feel comfortable, like, really opening up to them again?
Probably not, no.
Right.
You're right. It makes you realize that those small moments of disconnection can really have a ripple effect on the whole relationship. But let's be honest, like being present is really hard. It's so hard, especially in today's world. What does the source say about why we struggle so much with this?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. And the source points to three main culprits, and that is technology overload, our multitasking culture, and just the constant pressure of mental stress.
Okay, let's break those down. Starting with technology, like our phones are basically a part of us these days. It's like we're always getting hit with these notifications and updates.
It's true. I mean, you've got social media, the 24/7 news cycle, this constant stream of information.
Hmm.
It's a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
And there's actually research showing that all this digital stimulation can actually rewire our brains, making it harder to focus and be present.
Wow. So it's not just a matter of willpower. There's a real like neurological thing going on here.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, we've got this pressure to multitask, to juggle a million things at once.
Yeah.
But as the source highlights, that often leads to, just giving half-hearted attention to everything instead of really engaging with anything fully.
Right. It's like we're sacrificing quality for quantity when it comes to our attention.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, of course, there's the mental stress, all the anxieties, the worries, the never-ending to-do list. It's exhausting.
Yeah. It really is.
Yes.
And all that mental clutter makes it so hard to just be present in the moment. The source actually compares it to trying to have a conversation while you're running a marathon in your mind.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really powerful image. So, given all these challenges, is it even possible to become more present in our relationships? Or are we just like doomed to be distracted and disconnected?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked that because the good news is, we're not doomed at all.
Okay, good.
The source actually gives us some really practical strategies for becoming more present. And and the cool thing is you don't have to like completely change your whole life to start seeing the benefits.
Okay, that's encouraging. But, after hearing all the reasons we struggle with presence, I've got to admit, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. Like, where do we even begin?
I totally get that.
Yeah.
It can feel a little daunting. But
Yeah.
but remember, even like small changes can make a big difference. The source emphasizes that it's like a journey, not a destination. One of the simplest but most effective things they suggest is creating what they call no phone zones.
Oh, interesting.
So like what if you just picked certain areas in your home, like let's say the dinner table,
Okay.
and made those like sacred spaces for connection, like totally free from technology?
Hmm. That's a really interesting idea, is like drawing a line and saying, okay, in this space, connection is the priority.
Exactly. And it's not just about these like physical spaces, it's also about creating mental spaces too. The source talks about the power of active listening, like really focusing on what the other person is saying, both their words and their, body language.
Okay.
And they even give some phrases that you can try, like, so what you're saying is,
Oh, okay.
to reflect back what you're hearing, making sure you're really understanding them.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of active listening, but to be honest, I've never really like actively tried to do it. What difference does it actually make?
Well, think about a time when you really felt heard by someone, like they were really listening to you. How did that make you feel?
Um, I guess seen and respected, like what I had to say actually mattered.
Exactly. And when we feel heard, we're so much more likely to open up and share our thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
And that's how you build those deeper connections. But active listening, it's not just about the words, it's also about, our body language. The source talks about how important eye contact is.
Mm.
It's a way to show genuine interest
Mm.
and make the other person feel truly seen.
Yeah, it's funny how something so simple can like have such a big impact. I mean, we all know it's rude to like be on your phone when someone's talking to you, but it's so easy to just do it without thinking.
It really is. It's so easy to fall into that trap. And that's why the source encourages us to be more mindful of our, digital habits. It's not about like getting rid of technology altogether.
Hmm.
It's more about being intentional with how and when we use it. Like, for example, instead of scrolling through social media before bed, what if you spent that time having a good conversation with your partner or reading a book?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's about making choices that prioritize connection over distraction.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings us to another really important strategy, mindfulness. The source actually gives us this simple technique that we can try right now.
Okay.
Just take a few deep breaths, noticing the rise and fall of your chest. Feel the air as it enters and leaves your nostrils. And as you're doing this, just observe your thoughts and feelings without any judgment. Just notice them come and go like clouds passing by.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that actually is really calming. I can see how like taking little moments like that throughout the day could help ground you, bring you back to the present moment.
It really can. It's a really powerful tool. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes to catch yourself when your mind starts to wander and bring it back to the present moment. But here's something I think is really interesting. The source, it doesn't just focus on being present with others.
Mm-hmm.
It also talks about how important it is to be present with ourselves.
Oh, that's a good point. Like, you can't really be present with others if you're not fully present with yourself. But what does that even mean?
Yeah, it's a great question. It means taking time to, check in with your own thoughts and feelings, being aware of like your physical sensations, and just cultivating this sense of like inner stillness. It's like treating yourself with the same kindness and attention you would give to someone you love.
So it's about self-reflection and self-care, too.
Exactly. And this is where, the connection between presence and personal growth really becomes clear.
Okay.
The source argues that by practicing presence, we become more self-aware, and that allows us to make more conscious choices about how we live our lives.
This is all making a lot of sense. But it is a lot to, like, wrap your head around.
Mhm.
What would you say is the most important thing for our listener to take away from all this?
Yeah, it feels like we're talking about like a really big shift in how we see things.
Hmm.
Like going from, always chasing what's next to actually like appreciating the power of right now, of this moment.
Exactly. And the source really emphasizes that presence. It isn't just about these little moments of mindfulness here and there. It's about, like, cultivating a whole new way of being, like, in the world.
Okay.
It's about bringing that awareness and intention to everything you do, from the ordinary stuff to the really important things.
So how do we actually do that? How do we make that shift? Like, especially for someone who's, maybe feeling a little overwhelmed by all this, what's one small, like concrete thing they could try today, like to start being more present in their life? I think the best thing you can do is just start with a simple intention. Like before you go into any interaction, whether it's, a conversation, having dinner, even just going for a walk with someone, take a second to just like set the intention to be fully present. Remind yourself why it matters to you.
Hmm. So it's like setting a little reminder in your mind, like a presence alarm that goes off before you do something.
Yeah, exactly. And even if you find your mind wandering during that interaction, it's okay. Don't get down on yourself. Just kind of like notice that you're distracted and bring your attention back to the moment.
Right. It's like we were saying earlier, it's a practice. It's not about being perfect. But what about those times when we're not with other people? How can we, like, be more present then?
Well, the source talks about adding little mindfulness practices into your daily routine. Like even just taking a few minutes each morning to sit quietly. Notice the feeling of your breath, the sounds around you, how your body feels in the chair.
Right. Like creating a little bit of quiet space, in the middle of all the craziness of everyday life.
Yeah, exactly. And the great thing about these little practices is that they don't require, any special equipment or anything. You can do them anywhere, anytime.
I love that, making it accessible for everyone. But it's not just about, like, individual things we do,
Mhm.
right? The source also talked about creating this, like, culture of presence in our relationships with the people we care about.
Absolutely. It's about making a conscious effort to be present together.
Okay.
It could be like having honest conversations about why it's important to be present or setting aside specific times for just connecting with each other without any distractions or even just, making a pact to put your phones away during dinner.
Yeah, like making that commitment together to prioritize quality time, to have
Yeah,
those real interactions with each other.
exactly. And that brings us back to the question that the source started with, how present are you in your relationships? But instead of thinking of it like a test, I think it's better to see it as like an invitation to be more aware, more intentional, more connected.
I love that. That's a great way to put it. So, to everyone listening, we challenge you. Think about that question. How present are you? And more importantly, what's one thing, just one thing you can start doing differently, like today?
It doesn't have to be some big thing. Maybe it's putting your phone away at dinner or taking a few minutes to do a mindfulness practice or just really trying to listen the next time someone's talking to you.
Yeah. Whatever it is, remember that even small things can make a big difference. Enjoy the journey, be patient with yourself, and trust that by working on being more present, you're not just improving your relationships, but you're also creating a more meaningful, more fulfilling life for yourself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into presence. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep diving deeper.